Had I lived in a previous time and got tattooed by Rembrandt, or tattooed by Van Dyck, or tattooed by Van Gogh, or tattooed by Picasso, I think you would think that this would be something that ought to be preserved, rather than just be destroyed when I died. My name's Jeff, and for the last 20 years I've been walking down the path of getting a full body tattoo. I was 42 when I got the first little piece, 43 when I got the second, and after that it just sort of continued for 15 years or so. I found that it was not possible to get my arms tattooed until after I retired from full-time work, and now that that's happened, that will be something that we'll be doing very shortly. I'm looking forward to eventually completing the suit. Why did I do it? Well, I don't exactly know, except I was always fascinated by people with tattoos. I just couldn't believe how fabulous I thought they were, the way they jumped about, and when the person moved, so did the tattoo. But nice boys coming from middle-class families didn't have tattoos, and so I didn't have any tattoos either. I went to school and university, and then I became employed as a teacher, and I didn't have any tattoos. But when I turned 40, I decided that this was about time I actually did something that I wanted to do with my life, and went and got the first little piece. They divide people almost immediately. People love them or hate them. Why? For me, it was something that I'd always wanted. It defines your mortality. You're marked for the whole of your life. Once you've got the ink there, you can never get rid of it. In spite of what people say, there will always be evidence of the ink that you've had there.
Jeff cruised into a tattoo studio I was working in when I first got back from Los Angeles. He was basically a cruiser in tattoo shops. Lots of people come and kick the tyres in tattoo shops. Jeff became my project, and I have documented Jeff by portraits for the 16 years I've worked with him. It's not like a normal relationship at all. It's not like a friendship, it's not like marriage, none of those things. It's founded in pain. Of course, you get to know more and more about that person. You know, that person reveals themselves more the more you work with them, because you're torturing them. But, you know, it's a willing torture.
I've always had a pretty poor body image. I was always the fat kid who was the last one chosen at games, the kid with glasses, the kid who could never hit the ball because he could never see it coming. I just didn't like the way I looked. I never have liked the way I've looked. And suddenly I'm just amazed that people now are interested in the body that I have at the age of 62. You see yourself being transformed. You see the transformation of the flesh. And it's a fairly wonderful thing. And the elation, the euphoria that comes at the end of the tattoo is unlike any other things that I know of.
How long have you been together?
Too long. Like 14 years too long.
14 years.
It was just the character of Jeff that I totally went wow about. When I saw this chap across the room, I just thought, wow, he's most unusual. The colours is the first thing that you see on him. They're very strong, they're very vibrant. Having flowers on his body really says his personality.
The radical difference between an art practice and tattooing is that it's not for you. It's got to be about them. You're an agent for their change. All you're doing is facilitating something they need. We wouldn't have done a suit of flowers if he didn't want a suit of flowers. I think metamorphosis is a good description, because Jeffrey's making himself Slowly, I think, he's become an extraordinary sight.
When I was quite small, I spent quite a long time with my mother's sister, who didn't have any children at that stage. She was a very, very keen gardener and horticulturalist and so on. We often used to go at weekends to the Paddy's Market in Sydney and come back laden with flowers in the car and spend hours putting them in vases and so on. She, I think, enjoyed having someone to be involved with it with her passion, just as I enjoyed being with her.
Oh, you got the Gamia lily.
They're flowering again, they're quite beautiful.
And you got
at the
an
moment.
acacia, which could be Sydney golden waterhole. And we got all the blue lilies, the water lilies, I think.
The blue water lilies, yes.
Jeff came over and spent 2 full days identifying the flowers. And I think we ended up with something like 62 flowers. And the tattoo artist did a fantastic job, even though the amount of leaflets in a specimen sometimes. So they're quite botanical accurate, I would say.
What flowers do you think should be on this other arm, which we're waiting to go on? It has to have some wisteria. You can't have a Sydney garden without wisteria.
I think it's quite unique, because as far as I know, nobody has a whole arrangement of flowers all around the body, and especially Australian natives.
The uniqueness of it comes not only from it being done mostly by a great artist. It was an attempt to expand the barriers of an art form or a craft form, if you like, tattooing. I don't want to sound too precious about this, but when Michelangelo was doing the Sistine Chapel ceiling, it must have been the same sort of effect that people had when they saw it.
I've engaged with a lot of mediums that are not perceived as legitimate by the art world. Photocopy, I worked a lot with biros and coloured pencils and then tattooing, and I was told I was committing artistic suicide by even looking at tattooing. And then working with natural history is even more delegitimised, so I'm quite interested in those things. You know, if it's not real art, then it must be interesting.
We've been collecting Exeter Medici's work since the 1980s. She's been in a number of large contemporary Australian art shows. She's been in the Australian Pacific Triennial, and she's really has been recognised quite widely as one of the more important Australian contemporary artists. I first saw Jeff's body at the Australian Print Symposium when X was the keynote speaker. I guess I couldn't quite believe the beauty of the work and the detail, the incredible number of floral images. And I guess I thought about the pain that was involved as well. It's the end result of a really very intricate process of 2 people who are very obsessed by what they do.
Still a bit concerned about the design she's drawn up for the tattoo. It's very confronting. It's very confronting. And giving such a prominent spot on the...
But that's what X is like.
Yes, I know that. But
I hear that she's doing a skull for you.
Yes, a skull, and it's very interesting, but it's very confronting as well. And,
I think it's imperative that you have a death in life at this moment.
well, yes, indeed, yes.
And I've also prepared 2 native
Lovely, wonderful
plants, which is the fringe lily and the coneflower from WA.
Lovely.
It's the first tattoo I've done in a year.
Breaking the drought.
Tattooing has trained me to be patient, because you can't do everything in a day. You can't work endlessly on a skin, on your living skin, for instance, because it gives up on you. It experiences too much pain, it loses blood, it loses its life force, I guess. But he was a pig for it in the early days. You know, he wouldn't go under 9 hours per session until, you know, he had a breakdown in one of the sessions, and as he was getting older, and we decided we'd had to change our ways.
Getting tattooed is something that you really can't explain to other people. Sure, it's painful, and when you see someone with heavily tattooed, you've got no idea what pain they might have gone through, or they must have gone through, to achieve their desire. On the other hand, if it was if the pain was so unbearable, then they wouldn't have gone. They wouldn't have got the work that they've got. It's a fascinating concept as to, it's something you cannot understand unless you've actually gone through the process of being heavily tattooed.
In the beginning, when we first started, there was a whole different discussion going on, which was, won't it be funny to throw my carcass into a fire when I die? All that money, all up in flames. And so we used to think that was quite kind of funny in a way, that, it's just like lighting your cigarette with your money. And then something changed, and Jeff thought that his investment was, a more serious investment now, and that maybe it shouldn't go into the fire. I guess that's where the discussion just began.
It's there for your life, but of course it dies with you as well. It's not like the Grecian urn that has a life that goes on and on and on. This is terminal, and so that unless you happen to have your skin preserved, as it happened in Japan, then it goes with you.
Yes, of course, it can be collected, like art. You have to kill that person to get it, though, or that person must die to have it. So, yes, it can be collected, but not so readily. Thinking about your own death is a fairly confronting thing to do, and I think that was very hard for him, to confront what's going to happen to his remains and that they continue to live on.
From Banks's diary. Our collection of plants has now grown so immensely large that it was necessary that some extraordinary care should be taken of them, lest they should spoil in the books. I therefore devoted this day to the business and carried all the drying paper, near 200 quires of which...
I see no problem in preserving the skin. I think it should be preserved. It's very similar to the work behind. It's on the skin, it's tattooed on the skin, or it might be painted on the skin. It's actually not that much difference in terms of the final product. I mean, the fact that it's on a body is extraordinary, and certainly it raises a huge number of questions, but essentially I see it as a work of art, and as such it can be part of a collection.
I never have seen a tattooed skin in a gallery. I do know, though, that when I was a small child, one of my delights was going to the Australian Museum, where they had 2 tattooed Maori heads, and I used to stare in amazement at these.
Jeff had a series of illnesses, and I got much more familiar with Jeff's artwork. At one stage, he needed abdominal surgery, so he has some big scar lines in his lovely artwork. When he said that he was thinking of donating his skin to the National Gallery, I initially was a little concerned. I wasn't sure about the public health implications. I actually rang the New South Wales Coroner's Office and asked them, was there something in particular I should do or find out? And they actually said that his skin was his property, and what he did with it was his business, and that includes after his death.
If I donate my heart or my kidneys or some other part of me to someone else and they're useful, I certainly don't want them back. And if in fact my skin can go to a museum or an art gallery and provide interest to people, if not pleasure to people who see it, but at least amazement or interest or whatever, then I'm very happy for that to happen. I certainly won't be wanting my skin back.
Jeff's made an unusual request. It's the first time I'd ever heard of anybody donating their skin, and the mental picture that came into my mind was how that might be done and what Jeff's body may look like as a result of that. But basically, it's a wonderful way in which Jeff's able to personalise his life and his death and what he has contributed to society, and that should be the situation with every funeral. Every family and every person's group of friends should be able to celebrate that person in a way that honours and remembers that person for who they are, and this is certainly the person that Jeff is.
And basically being tattooed is changing by the way I look. Simple as that.
Yeah, but we're not chopping you up.
But not yet. No, that
Not at this stage.
Well, once the animal dies, the animal's hopefully got to me as soon as possible. If not, people are advised to put them in a freezer or a cool environment to keep them as fresh as possible, because as soon as the body dies, the decay starts. So what we do is we skin the animal, then salt it, which brings out all the moisture, and then it can be dried for several days or several weeks, and then it's sent away to a professional tanner that tans the skin and then sends it back for me for mounting. Wow. Firstly, you have to decide how you'd want to be skinned. Yeah. To give the best display. Not having done a human myself, I can only relate to these guys. I would assume that there wouldn't be a lot of differences in the processes. There are certain minor technicalities that you'd have to overcome, but my first impression was, apart from the legal side of things, it'd be pretty much as straightforward as any other mammal. So you could do a cut up each arm and a cut up each leg and then up the middle, but is that going to destroy any artwork that you've got on?
He's already got a cut down the middle
on your front.
He had surgery.
Oh, okay. There's another way that you could probably cut each leg and roll it over, pull the skin over like a sock.
Yeah. Is there any way so like you cut there, fold it out and take the body out that way?
Yeah, that could be an option too. I think it's a very novel idea in relation to preserving an art form. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but then neither is taxidermy or car racing. You know, unusual in the world of taxidermy is only limited by your imagination. It's a tricky question. It's like whether, in fact, the plant dies the moment you pick it from the bush. You don't know how the flower suffers as the secateurs come and cut it off and chop it off and put it in a vase. Then the agony it goes through as it gradually dies over the next, say, 3 or 4 days. Who knows?
I'm a nurse, and so I see bodies in all different manner in my work, both dead and alive. Because I have no idea how my emotions would be. I'm hoping that I would treat it, that it wouldn't faze me. But after thinking about it, I'm really not that sure.
Now this is what I was planning to wear, but with this shirt over the top once we get there. There is a whole lot of guilt attached to people who lived through the AIDS crisis of the early 90s. A feeling of, why have they died and why haven't I died? We lost lots of friends, including just about all the people I had known at university. Lots and lots and lots of people all died. At one stage, I think there were 2 or 3 funerals a week, and that was very sad that happened. And I suppose you get a feeling that, well, living for the moment, and at any moment we could die.
I think if you don't think about death, then you're a fool as a human. It's the only thing we know nothing about, other than to witness it, for instance, or to mark it. But in reality, it's the only thing we don't know about. So it's a question one must ask. Sitting inside this room is a full discourse in real death, as a representation of livingness, as much as a tattoo is a full discussion of death. Inside every drawer and every cabinet are thousands upon thousands of the dead, of the beautiful dead.
How's the time going? 9 o'clock. That's my cut-off time for finishing. Here. There. Many people, when they have been together for a long time, fear the separation that will happen. I would feel very sad if Joey were to die or depart in some way, and I think he feels the same way about me as well. Is that you, Joe? Just ringing to tell you everything's okay. We're at Shinjuku, what's a large railway station in Tokyo. We're going to the Skin Museum tomorrow. Haven't been there yet.
Not that many people see themselves in the beginning to be a heavily tattooed person. Most people who get tattoos just get a few things. But when a person begins in the very beginning wanting to utterly transform themselves, they're not that regular. The surface is the indicator of the depth. Sometimes when you look at a heavily tattooed body, it becomes something quite different, something that is almost like a cloak. It draws the eye to something entirely different.
When I travel, I make sure that there is a copy of my will just inside the compartment in the top of my big bag, so that if I were to be killed or anything should happen to me, then the instructions are quite clearly there. And in my wallet I have the card belonging to the funeral director who will be looking after the preservation of the skin. If I were to die, the only evidence of the wonderful artwork that X has been doing is from photographs. But actually being able to see the real thing, it makes it much more interesting, I think.
Okay, this is a skin of the whole bodies. So look.
I am.
So
just cut down the middle there from the chin down.
yes, it is very difficult to remove the skin if you injure the skin. So I must dry the skin.
メスを入れる場所っていうのは大体決まってましてですね、正中線上、体の真ん中にこう墨を入れてきて、へそを避けますよね。おへそは避けて、そして、皮下結合組織と皮膚の間、真皮の間で、そこにメスを入れて、皮膚をだんだんとこう外側に持ってって、なんていうのかな、剥いでいくんですね。メスを入れながら剥ぐという過程が必要になってきます。そして、それでもやっぱり皮膚を傷つけないようにしなきゃいけないんで、皮膚の方にはメスが入らないようにして、この脂肪層あるいは皮下結合組織の方にメス先が行くようにして注意深く皮膚を剥いでいくという過程が必要です。
I've seen other taxidermed skins and preserved things. To see the skin was not a shock, was expected in a way. The identity of that person is gone, long gone. It's not a person anymore. It's an object. Death is not an easy subject to discuss. Silence after noise is a very strange thing.
just going home. It's not.
When I was asked would I give the skin away, I said, yeah, of course. It's fine. So what, you know, but I won't be around to use it. But then, particularly when I mentioned it to a few friends, they said, oh, yuck. Oh, no, I don't think I'd like to see that. No, I certainly don't want to go to the museum and see Jeff strung up there on the wall. But it's a whole issue of mortality, of life and death, of beauty. This is the allegory of life, that we are all born to die. The fact that every religion has some concept of an afterlife suggests very much that it's a pretty universal theme. And I'm really agnostic as far as to what that afterlife would be like. I cannot understand it, but I certainly know that it won't be like this life.